Last week, I went to my cousin's child's baptism. Our family descended en masse to their local Methodist church to watch as the first member of a new generation of our family was welcomed into a much larger family. When the presbyter was preaching, they spoke about sin. They asked people to raise their hands if they'd done anything wrong, if they'd ever upset someone, if they'd ever lied, if they'd ever disobeyed an adult. All of us raised our hands at some point, except for one person, the baby about to be baptized. There are no saints in here, nobody who hasn't sinned, claimed the presbyter. Except one, shouted one member of the congregation, pointing at the baby. The service then carried on as if nothing had happened, but as I saw it, a fundamental challenge had been issued to what we were all doing that day. What were we doing? Baptizing the one person in the room who had never sinned. The presbyter was preaching a baptism into the forgiveness of sins, but the sins that they had listed could hardly be applied to someone so innocent as the baby. The question was raised again last week on Twitter, after a misuse of the doctrine of original sin had many up in arms against Christianity, rejecting both the faulty reading and the doctrine itself, throwing the baby out with the baptismal water. The problem with both is the understanding or misunderstanding of sin. Original sin isn't to say we're inherently bad and need to be educated and indoctrinated to be good. That's to ignore grace. Nor can we discard original sin and claim that we're all inherently good and capable of acting in such a way that we avoid fallenness. I was talking to one of my friends this week who works at the Good Funeral Company. She was telling me about how they want to buy a cuddle cot to lend to grieving families. A cuddle cot is a refrigerated Moses basket that enables bereaved parents to take their baby's body home for a while before the burial. It's something we don't talk about much, but my friend said from bitter experience that babies die all the time. The most innocent people in this world die all the time. There's simply no way of acting that can opt us out of this fallen, broken cosmos. To be innocent is also to be vulnerable in this cruel, hostile world. Even the cosmos itself, as our Hebrews reading tells us, has no chance to do anything wrong before sin was at play. Original sin means that Christ would have had to suffer from the very foundation of the cosmos. So what is this original sin? This darkness in everyone that leaves us in mortal peril and permeates the whole of time and space, if it isn't in any way an action that we might think of as a sin. Many Christians celebrated light parties last week, a Halloween tradition which emphasizes the nature of darkness as simply a lack of light. That's the truth of original sin. We don't carry around a piece of evil within us, but rather there is a darkness to us, a distance from God, a restlessness. As St. Augustine writes, our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. At the baptism, the baby was baptized with water, signed with the cross, and given a lit candle. Even one who was yet to do something wrong went through this symbolic death, burial, and resurrection. They were marked with the sign of the cross, the symbol of this death. And they were given a light, the symbol of the light that enters and enfolds us as a result of Jesus' death and resurrection. When a baby is given these symbols of Jesus' actions, it's crystal clear that it isn't our own action that resolves this distance, this darkness. Jesus' good news isn't that we can usher in the rain if only we could spend some time and do some work. No, rather, it is that the time is fulfilled and the rain has come near. The message is described in the gospel as a euangelion. Now, in the ancient world, a euangelion isn't something to be accepted or rejected. It's generally an announcement of a military victory or the succession of an emperor. It's news of a paradigm shift, something far beyond our control. The response isn't to get to work to bring the shift about. It's already happened. The response is to repent, to repent, literally rethink, to change our minds and to believe the news. So this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, this very world, this dark, broken, fallen world that we inhabit. Light has come in. It has broken through 1,990 years ago, on a Friday afternoon in April, on a hill in Palestine. It has broken through, and a cross marks the spot. And that's why we baptize babies. We find ourselves in darkness, all of us, even the most innocent and vulnerable. But through Jesus' death and resurrection, in which we are invited to partake, we become part of the brilliant reign that draws near in the gospel. In our co-crucifixion and co-resurrection, we are brought through the way Christ deals with sin. We repent, we are transformed, and we become part of this now and not yet reign, which isn't for dealing with sin, but for saving those who eagerly wait. We are brought out of our original darkness into glorious light. And yes, a choice remains, but it isn't whether to improve ourselves or to perish. Rather, it's whether we remain in the dark, vulnerable and stumbling, or whether we change our minds, open our eyes, and see that brilliant light which has come near.